This, I believe, is about our 6th collaborative conversation hosted by the Presbytery. We have only been recording the last couple of them and put them up onto our YouTube channel. If any of those topics you want to check out, we did preschools was our last one, and the one before that was church security. You can find those videos on our YouTube channel. Let's see. Yeah, let's go ahead, and I'm going to introduce David Hutchinson is with us today. He is our Bisbee team chair. Go ahead, take it away, David.
Okay, nice to see you all. I'm in my basement, which is why I look this way. There's a light over my head. And we're having our floors redone, so most of our furniture's in a pod in the street, and I'm in the basement because it's the only place I can be. Um, all that said, this is important enough to be with you in the midst of that. So there you go. I've been retired for 3 years. I served as pastor at Colonial Heights Presbyterian for 8 years, which is now closed, and I was at their last service. And then I was at Westminster Presbyterian for 11 years, 12 years as the associate pastor for education and mission and a few other things. And then for 8 years was at Plymouth Presbyterian in St. Helens. I live in Portland, Oregon. And all of those churches had some kind of food ministry, feeding ministry. Westminster tried to do a collaborative thing with the neighborhood church that is to a degree still going, which was also to an extent multicultural and interdenominational. Colonial Heights did a thing called Interfaith Hospitality Network, which housed people overnight and had tried to feed them in the morning. And St. Helens has a food bank and a meals program that they cooperate with the Lutheran Church on. And so it has become a social event as well as a food event for a lot of people in that small town. So it's something I'm interested in and have been involved in. And I think if there's one thing that maybe really unites churches, no matter where you're from or what kind of a town or rural and urban or different theology or political leanings, that this one thing is remarkably persistent as a thing we know we can do and that we frankly can do pretty well. And there's all kinds of different ways to do it better. And that's what today's about for me. The only other thing I'll say, and the main reason I'm here today as a retired person, is that I chair now the Bisbee grants team. And Catherine Bisbee gave money in 1991 to a large foundation in Oregon. And one of the entities under that large organization that gets some of that money every year that's managed by this group is Presbytery the Cascades. And Catherine Bisbee wanted to fund ministry that was in cooperative neighborhood community ministries with faith-based that help families and people. And that's really what she wanted. And so the application is there for you to consider. And the team really does want to honor her original wishes, but also every year for 20 or so, I remember clear back to David Crow when I was involved with Bisbee Funds, but I never chaired the team before. There was a theme picked each year because it's hard to, there's so many possibilities. And each year there's a theme that helps the grants team focus. And that theme is what we use most to determine, okay, what direction, what applications are going to rise to the top. And so it's not necessarily about the quality of the applicant. We look for certain things like some diversified funding and cooperative things and community things. But also this year, the theme is food ministry, food insecurity, and trying to mitigate that. It's been domestic violence, it's been security systems. It's been all kinds of things in the past. And so those areas took precedence when we received applications. This year, any church that has a food ministry is welcome to apply. But also remember, we're also going to look at community, interfaith, cooperative, and those kinds of things. And there's only so much money each year. So the grants are small, 700, 500, 1,000, $1,500. But frankly, for a small church doing food ministry, $1,000 can do a lot in that arena. So we're not going to give the money to the Oregon Food Bank as much as they do good work. We're going to try to find small community ministries that we can make an impact. And I hope if that's helpful to you or you want to consider it, read the application, read the background, see how you can fit your application to what we're looking for. And you're all welcome to apply. I think if you're at this conversation, you probably have some reason to consider the application on some level. So if we get a whole bunch of them, we'll reduce the amount of grants and we'll give a bunch. Or maybe we'll find one and give it all there, but it's highly unlikely. Most likely what will happen is if there's lots of applications, the size of the grants will be reduced and spread more broadly. But it all depends. I can't speak for the team and what they'll decide. That's all I got. And so if you have questions, you're welcome later in this thing to do it. But I think Sherry has some other plans for what we're going to do next.
Yes, I do. On the heels of what David just said, ideally, what I would love to see is everybody apply in whatever amount you need, and then we go out to the Presbytery or we figure out some way to maybe get the Catherine Bisbee funds matched by maybe some, money that is sitting in a grant fund somewhere and isn't really being put to good use. And maybe we can draw some funds out of that and then help you with some better funding. So that is where I'm thinking we're probably going to end up. But let's go ahead and get started. Thank you, David, for telling us about the Bisbee. Yeah, we're grateful today to have the Reverend Dr. Brad, as of June, 7th?
Yeah, June 5th.
Brad Busick joining us here today from our Smith Memorial Church out in Fairview. I've had the privilege of visiting there recently, and what he's got going there is really amazing. But I have to say, I also was proofing the omnibus coming out here later this week, and there's a full-page expose on Smith Memorial and a lot of the other great work they're doing there. So watch for that. I think it's on page 7 or something like that of the upcoming omnibus that comes out tomorrow. But yeah, Brad, did you want to go ahead and do our elevator speeches now or after now?
Yes, and I apologize for not connecting with you a few minutes ago. But yeah, I have a PowerPoint, and it begins with the elevator speech. A quick, brief introduction. I'd love to know who's here. So like 30 seconds, if you can share about your name, what church you're part of. And I'm curious if you already have a food ministry at your congregation or if you're interested in starting something brand new. And I think this is important because perhaps later we might want to exchange phone numbers and emails and reconnect where we can support each other and share ideas depending on what stage of food ministry you're in, because I'm sure I can learn from some of you as well. Is that okay, Sherry, if we go ahead and proceed with the, let me pull up the shared screen here. And so first, here's my contact information. I'll share it later again in case you don't have time to write it down, but I don't mind for you to email or call me if you want to talk some more. But briefly, who I am, I'm pastor at Smith Memorial Presbyterian Church, been here for 9 years and moved here from North Carolina and was a pastor there for 14 years and been doing food ministry at Smith for about 4 years. And so that is who I am. But I would love for us to go around the room and briefly introduce yourself and share the food ministry. And I'll have Sherry help moderate that as we go.
Yeah, if you came it's not required, of course, that you share. If you came prepared, if you want to put your hand up either virtually with the hand raise button or just raise your hand on your screen. Why don't we just go ahead and call on people? Brad, I'm wondering if there we go. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
That way we can see each other's faces.
Now we can see each other's. So, okay, let's try that again. If you'd like to raise your hand, and Donna.
Yes, I'm from First Presbyterian Church in Ashland. I have a PhD in counseling and marriage and family therapy, which helps me tremendously in dealing with our homeless people as they come up to our little free pantry. I go and pick up some food from the food bank once a week, a box. But other than that, the church and people help us, put food in there. I go twice a day and restock it with what I can and what I have on hand. And all the homeless people that are in the park across the street, or some of our people who live in their cars at our church, they know my car. So it's wonderful being able to interact with all of them.
Yeah, thank you, Donna. So I might mention I had the opportunity to see Donna's little food pantry. And it's like one of those little libraries that you see in people's neighborhoods where you just go and help yourself. But we can learn more about that as well from Ashland and what they're doing there. Mark Hutchinson, I see your hand up.
Thank you. I'm from Reedville Presbyterian. We're a little church over towards Hillsboro, and we've had a food pantry that's mainly been serving the Hispanic community. And as our congregation has changed, we're looking to kind of change that as we see more food pantries in the area, but we also see some young and some elderly that maybe could use some help. So we're in the process of rejiggering things to fit the people that we have in the church now and the people we'll have in the future, and to better fit our community as our area kind of grows and changes.
Sweet. Thanks, Mark. So there's Aloha outside of Beaverton. Carolyn from First Vancouver.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Carolyn. I'm with First Presbyterian Church in Vancouver, Washington. I head up Healthy Equitable Living Project, also known as HELP. We have a shopping style client choice food pantry that focuses on students in our local school districts that are experiencing food insecurity. So currently, we distribute about 4 tons a week, serving about 1,200 to 1,400 individuals in a month. And yeah, that's it. I'm happy to be here and nice to see everyone.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Absolutely.
Why don't I go ahead and call on Becky?
Hi, I'm clerk of session at Mill City Presbyterian Church. We were lucky enough over 20 years ago to be gifted the small house that sits behind our church with a tiny 1-bedroom, but it does have a garage, so we do have a little bit of storage space. We're open 2 morning a week and 1 evening a week. We average between 145 and 100 and 200 families a month, upwards of 600 people. We're going to be inundated very soon. 92-unit apartment complex for low-income housing is going to be finished by the end of the summer. And we're not quite sure what we're going to do with all those people.
Glad you're here, Becky. Sharon.
So we don't have a pantry anymore. We used to have an informal one, but we do all of our ministries seem to be food related. So we have a once and most social for people who are in mental health assisted living, and they come over and eat. We feed them meal and they play games. We have the Sheltering Our Neighbors Network, which used to be housing people in the church. Now they're in hotels, but we still take them home cooked meals are every so often throughout the year. We do Letty Owings. We have Letty Owings Center come over for meals and Santa a couple of times a year, usually. And we've partnered with the Father's House, which means making 120 sandwiches periodically throughout the month and also providing hot meals. So it's more intimate than the 600. I mean, it's fewer than the 600 and it's served food. But we seem to always, have a touch point of food hospitality.
In West Lynn. Let's see, Betty.
Yes, I couldn't make the hand work. I attend First Presbyterian Church of Medford, Oregon. And for over 10 years, we've been allied with Access and we run a food pantry. Yesterday, we gave out food, groceries to 198 families in 3.5 hours.
Wow.
We also do a brown bag lunch or brown bag cafe, we call it, where we hand out sack lunches to the homeless or anyone else who wants to take them. Again, we reach really high. We're usually about 100 lunches a day. Monday, we did 174 lunches. Yesterday, 166. We've got a lot of churches here in the valley. We happen to be like half a mile from I-5. We're downtown, so we get a lot of the homeless around us. A lot of churches don't, so a lot of the churches work with us. They make sandwiches for us. They buy Ensure that we can give out to the senior citizens or anything, dog and cat food, because the homeless, they have their pets need to eat. So our efforts are community-wide, but they spearhead out of our church.
Nice. Let's see, who else? Jody. Jody, there we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Jody Thompson from the First Presbyterian Church in North Bend. And we just opened, we've been operating a food bank in our church for probably 30 years, but we just went to a shopping only one at 1st of May. And we serve about 300 families a month through we're open 2 days a week. And we also, one of our congregation members has started a sandwich ministry on Sundays after church out at one of our centers that deals with homeless people. So we are seeing, especially now that summer has come, families coming in with children home for the summer. And so we already have seen a growth in how many people that have come into us.
All right, thanks for sharing, Jody. Eileen.
I'm with John Knox in Kaiser, and in the mid-90s, we found the John Knox, I think they called it the kitchen cupboard or the kitchen pantry or something like that. Since then, it has grown and expanded. We ran out of room. Faith Lutheran up the street now hosts the Kaiser Community Food Bank, and there are 5 churches in Kaiser that serve and staff it and help with it. They're serving about, the last I heard, between 125 and 150 people or families, I should say, 2 days a week, and always looking for more volunteers. And then the church, John Knox, also participates with Backpack Buddies at our local elementary school. And we're feeding 25 kids right now and hoping to increase that next year.
Anyone else? All right, Brad, let's turn it back over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, and appreciate you sharing what y'all are doing, and very humbling to hear about all the ministries at the churches. And it's really exciting that other congregations have been in food ministry. And so I will be sharing a little bit about our background and what we've done, and maybe there might be one or two ideas that you can glean that enhance your pantry. And feel free to interrupt if you have a question, but I will have time for questions at the end. And if you haven't done so already, you can mute your microphone so you don't get some feedback. But I'll go ahead and share my screen. And again, feel free to turn your microphone back on if you need to interrupt with a question. So let's see. Is everybody able to see my screen? Then you can give Sherry a thumbs up. Okay, so this is our mission statement for our food pantry. And obviously we provide free food, but part of what we really emphasize is building relationships and relationships that promote dignity and collaboration and health and love. And how we started was back in the pandemic, I would say in March or April of 2020, like we helped Fairview Elementary School, which is across the street from our church. And they had a backpacks of food program. And with the pandemic, they weren't able to do much on their campus. And so they needed another site to hand out food. And so that's the principal and the social worker in that picture. And then there's also an apartment complex called Fairview Oaks and Woods that was doing some food ministry, and they needed another site because of the pandemic. And since we have a large parking lot, we hosted them, and we basically combined them in December of 2020 and officially became a partner agency with the Oregon Food Bank. And so that was the official birth of the East County Food Pantry. And I'm sure with all of your other food pantries, you give food to anybody, no matter their background, and volunteers, no matter the background, and we do that as well. So one of the things that you've probably found in your food pantries is you're not just ministering to the people in the community, but the volunteers form relationships and bonds, and that it's meaningful for the volunteers as well. But basics, we're open just one day a week on Saturday morning from 10:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. And currently we serve about 175 households that come, and it's equivalent to 3,000 individuals per month. We did serve about 250 households each Saturday morning, which was equivalent to 5,000 people. But we cut down, we did a lot of deliveries, and we've pretty much gotten rid of most of our deliveries to now that we only do about 20 deliveries instead of 100 deliveries. And sometimes as you develop as a food pantry, you might have to make some hard choices about things to cut. But where do we get our food from? We get our food from Target, Oregon Food Bank, Urban Cleaners, and then donations, and then we buy some food. So with the Oregon Food Bank, we are called an official partner agency, and I believe they have like 1,000 partner agencies. There's probably a waiting list to become a partner, but you can certainly contact them if you're interested. To get food from a grocery store like Target, a major chain, it does help to have the connection with the Oregon Food Bank, and you do something through Fresh Alliance, and you have to pass so many prerequisites of being able to store food and transport food. But Target has definitely helped us a lot. And then Urban Gleaners, I think we're the only religious faith-related group that Urban Gleaners delivers to. And what Urban Gleaners is, this is a Portland area nonprofit, and they go to different grocery stores like Trader Joe's or businesses that might have a cafeteria. that have pre-made food that they're unable to sell. And so they deliver to us on Saturday mornings as well. So any questions real quick about where we get the food?
Brad,
Yes.
again, just real quick, you did say that Fresh Alliance, the organization Fresh Alliance, can help you establish a relationship with a large retailer.
Yes.
Is that what you said? Okay.
Yes, but to become connected to Fresh Alliance, you have to be, for us, we had to become connected to the Oregon Food Bank. And so,
Okay.
so like if you're trying to find like some food sources, you might have to go to some smaller local stores and build a relationship with them. But like Target and like Fred Meyer, like they're kind of somewhat handcuffed to just simply donate to a church food pantry without that Fresh Alliance connection through the Oregon Food Bank. So, and yes, I'll pause here, and I see a hand raised up. So let me close the screen so that we can answer a question.
I just want to second what you said. The interfaith partnership, ecumenical partnership that Westminster was a part of for so many years, it became far more robust when they became in partnership with the Oregon Food Bank. So being in a partnership with some organization like that, whether that's in Portland or some other city, can make a big difference in terms of how you spread your resources and what you can do with the money that you do have. So I would second that.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so let's see on my screen here. It's not interesting to learn about some of you moving from like pre-packaged or drive-through to client choice. And so we did drive-through for 2 years, and is wonderful, fun experience, and it needed to happen during the pandemic. But definitely, if you're able to move to a shopping style that is preferred because it does empower people to choose their own, make their own grocery food choices, and they also feel less guilty about not wasting food, about getting food that they don't want. And the other benefit is they can meet other people and have more social contact. So I began pursuing my doctorate in 2018, and my doctorate is on leading organizational change. And so at the end, you have to pick a project. And so I never imagined that I'd do anything with food ministry, but it just kind of fell in our lap, and I fell in love with the experience. And so for my doctorate of ministry change project, it was about transitioning us from drive-through to a shopping style, but also with the twist of how can we build community with the people who come to the food pantry. And so with that, I had an independent study where I had a 3-month sabbatical, and I traveled the country and visited lots of food pantries and interviewed the leaders, talked to the volunteers, interviewed many of the recipients, and learned about what they like and don't like about the food ministries. And so in the yellow is sort of where I actually drove my car. Part of this was connected with my son. He just was a junior in high school, and so that summer he was looking at colleges. And so we looked at colleges and we visited food pantries along the way. And so I attached my whole dissertation, and so you can read that from Sherry's email. But I do want to highlight a few things that I appreciate about some of the pantries I visited. And so this was one of the first churches that I visited, and it's all volunteer run. What people have their shopping style in different location. It depends on, your building and your space, but they have a large entryway, and it's really kind of neat that it leads into the sanctuary. And so people, when they come in, they're able to see a little bit of the church's ministry. And although, of course, we follow that nice balance of not pushing religion onto people, and we follow the federal guidelines of receiving federal funding for some food, and having the space separated from this space for spiritual encounters separated from the distribution of food. But there is definitely a benefit where people can walk in and just feel comfortable in some of the space if you're wanting to connect with them on days other than your food distribution time. And here they had a long line outside, and they brought in 10 people at a time. So it was a benefit that when people were shopping, they had some nice spacing, that they weren't crowded together. But I did notice that there's this long crowd of people outside, and it was really hot. And so one of the things I noticed was, hey, there's people standing outside in the hot sun, and it's not very comfortable. And so that might be something that you think about, like, where are people waiting, and how is it enhancing love and dignity to people by the way they wait. So one of the things that they do is they have food underneath the table, so they only brought food off a few times. And so that's another thing I learned, is I didn't want people to feel like they're walking into a warehouse where there's just thousands of choices of food, where there's just a little bit displayed at a time, and then you can restock there. Adventure Church was a non-denominational church, and is probably the most sort of pushy church when it came to religion, but they balanced it well. And what was kind of interesting is, like, their volunteers did ask, at the end after they loaded the car, saying, "Is there anything I can pray with you today?" And usually I let other people initiate a religious conversation, but these volunteers did initiate it. And it was well received for the people that came, but they did it after the people received the food. But I also was really interested, because sometimes the people receiving the food would ask the question back to the volunteers or the church members, and the people receiving the food would pray for the church members. So that was really interesting to see. And then I also saw a lot of the recipients socializing as well, and that was inspirational too. This is an interesting story. Is one of their longest volunteers was picking up food for a neighbor, and saw that the line was really long. And so he became motivated volunteer, because he's like, "Oh, that's a long line. What the heck's taking so long?" And so what you'll notice, and what I've seen and what you've probably experienced, is sometimes some of your best volunteers have had the experience of waiting in line at your pantry, and they have some excellent ideas on how to improve it. So definitely try to figure out ways where you can get input from your community. They also started to try to have a community meal, and where they have a time for church members and food pantry recipients to get to know each other. And so they've had a lot of things that worked well and didn't work well that I learned from. And then this is just a reminder that you've probably experienced that when people come to a food pantry, they're often coming from something that has been really disruptive in their life. And so just recognize that something difficult and challenging is going on in their life, and so treat them obviously with a lot of love and care. And then at the Grand Canyon National Park, what is interesting is that you might feel like, at a national park setting where it's a tourist site, that there's not people necessarily in need of food, but there's a lot of workers at the Grand Canyon National Park, and they're paid minimum wage, and then the grocery stores and all the places to eat are really expensive there, because they're catered towards the tourists, and it's hard to get food over there. And so there's a huge need for to help the workers at the Grand Canyon. And so this guy is named Mike Scott, and he was on he worked with like 3 churches together that brought food, and they transitioned an old prison in Grand Canyon National Park to the food pantry. And one of the things that's really interesting at this food pantry is that most of their volunteers are police officers. And what they experience there is that after the food pantry is open, police calls for domestic violence decreased dramatically. They used to get 7 calls for domestic violence a week, and then now they get once a week. And they discovered that when people have food in their homes, there's less tension, less arguing in the homes, and it has decreased domestic violence. And so the food pantry, the police officers volunteer there because they say it makes their job a lot easier because of this food pantry. And so let's see. This is a food pantry in Arizona, and they do like a little devotional before they open. And so when you do devotionals, it has to be optional, and it can't be tied to like you have to do this in order to receive food. So they do it sort of at a separate time. So my point is there's so many different models that you can do food ministry and connect. The largest food pantry I visited was in San Jose, and they do 1,700 cars every Tuesday and Thursday, and every 60 seconds they can do like 30 cars, and they have this whole they have 90 volunteers that just run through it. So if you want to like learn how to do a really big operation, you can talk to Troy Beloka and he can teach you. But his advice to me was don't get this big. What he hates is when you got this big, you lose the personal interaction. In Orca Island, just north of us, there's a lovely food pantry, and they're literally on sort of a food desert. They're on an island, and it's much more expensive to get food because you have to take a ferry. But what Amanda does, like if you're on vacation and you want to visit a food pantry, visit hers. She makes everything beautiful. So she is an interior designer by profession, and so she has lots of great ideas of making things beautiful. But one of the things that you might also consider that I saw a trend here, if you're needing extra help at your food pantry, is consider an AmeriCorps volunteer. It does cost money to do, but that's something that you might want to consider to expand your food pantry. This is a food pantry in Seattle, and just an example of how people become interested in Christianity after volunteering. Deep was not a Christian, and after receiving food, he was just curious about like why are they giving this food away? And he became a volunteer, then he became the director, and he became a Christian. But one thing that's really important about their pantry is they take care of volunteers, and they have one volunteer that's just in charge of cooking, and they always have a meal for volunteers there, and their volunteer base is really like a family. I'm sure you've experienced as well. I'm going to kind of go through these first, but fast. But one person asked about money and how you raise funds, and probably one of the best inspirations I got was this food pantry in North Carolina, and they have this walking 5K fundraiser, and I'll share a little bit more about that at the end that we're going to try to do. A food pantry in Cincinnati was wonderful about providing space for people to relax as they receive food, and they have a lot of space to do this. But I just want to show examples. So their waiting room is like sort of a cafe, and people can have coffee and bagels and stuff like that. And they have 2 areas. So the marketplace is the food pantry, and then the warehouse is the clothing closet. And so people wait here until their number is called, and they can socialize. There's games, etc. So I learned a lot from the Healing Center, and all of their signs are just really well made and professional. And here they also have the philosophy of everything being uncluttered, and their shelves have wheels on them, and they roll them in and out of the back room. And so they restock them in the back room, and then they bring them out and stuff. So I'm going to pause here real quick because I see people smiling. Does any of that, any thoughts or comments about what you've seen so far? And I have a few more things I'll share. Okay, well, I'll proceed.
Yeah,
And so, yes,
my comment is that everybody seems to be doing all they can,
yes,
really caring for these people, you know, with homelessness up and cost of food's up and whatever. And it's really good to hear that.
yeah. And I would also say that one of the biggest lessons I learned traveling the country and visiting food pantries, like the people who work and volunteer at food pantries are the nicest people you'll ever meet.
Oh, we
And
hardly
so,
even get time to talk, but we feel
yeah,
like we're a family
yeah,
and we're caring
yeah.
for each other.
Yes. And so if anybody wants to make a new friend or feeling lonely, like find somebody who volunteers at food pantry. It's great. This is Trina at a food pantry in West Virginia. And again, like there's ways to like still be a church without pushing religion, but she has like this optional ride-on board where, you know, in the hallway where people can just every week write something that they're thankful to God for. And so anyhow, it's not a requirement, but it's just there to celebrate. And so she calls it I Praise God For board. And then she takes a picture of what people write every week, and she keeps a little notebook of everything that people have praised God for. So that's a simple way to incorporate some faith in there. The Canby Center, y'all might have heard of this place. They have like an optional devotional before it opens. One thing that's unique about them, they do ask every person who receives to volunteer and to go once a year to do this financial counseling, but also once a year to meet with another volunteer and just share a little bit about who they are and what their hopes and dreams. So that's one thing to learn. We don't really do that at our food pantry, but that's one model. And then I want to share about the All City Church in Portland. They don't have necessarily a food pantry, but I would say they have a unique food ministry. Before worship, they have a pancake breakfast, and I call it the Pancake Church. And when I was on sabbatical, just looking for a random church to go to, I found this church on the web because they serve pancakes, and I love pancakes. And so they have a great group of volunteers, but the way their whole worship is set up, the fellowship hall and the sanctuary are blended together. And so you can come and just eat pancakes and sit in the back and listen to the sermon if you want, or just have pancakes and leave. And so there's an interesting model, and if you ever want to get free pancakes. And then this is a lesson I learned from my home church in Houston, Texas. This was the favorite room that I had as a child growing up. This was the racquetball court. And when I visited during my sabbatical, they changed my racquetball court into a food pantry storage area. And so I bring this as a reminder that when you do food ministry at your church, you might have to change some things in your space, and it's going to upset some people. And that's part of ministry. And so for this, I love food ministry, I love racquetball, and it did make me sad. But I understand that things need to change. And so maybe this is a reminder to me that like it's okay to change every now and then. And if you can experiment and you can change things back if necessary. But there's always going to have to be some sort of sacrifice with change. And, you know, one of the, stories of, the feeding the 5,000, you look at the resources you have with the bread and the fish, but you have to actually turn that bread and fish over to Jesus and see what happens. In my paper, and definitely check to see some of the other books that are recommended, but I loved books about people who started a food pantry. And if you haven't read Sarah Miles, read her books. They're amazing and inspirational. In my paper, I talk about the Surgeon General. And so part of the big emphasis I put on that y'all might not, or we might take for granted, is how important social connection is. And so the Surgeon General is really concerned about the epidemic of loneliness, and that it can have a more detrimental effect on your health than lots of other things. And so think about, if you're really involved in a health ministry, of how you can not just provide food, but help people feel less lonely when they come. And so you can certainly read more about that. I'm going to skip through a few things. Get input from people in the pantry, both recipients and volunteers. And what we do is we provide lots of options. You can do drive-through or come inside. So we still have the drive-through option for those who like the anonymity of staying in their car. But once you come, you can wait anywhere on campus. I don't like people waiting in line. They can wait anywhere. They can be volunteer any way or not volunteer. And the flow of how we do this is they come through the main entrance of our church, they get a number, and then once they get that number, they can wait anywhere. And so we have a playground in the back that kids can play in. We have pickleball courts, we have basketball courts. Then we have this fellowship hall where people can have coffee and bagels, and we have games in the fellowship hall like checkers. We have registration in the sanctuary, but you can wait in the sanctuary if you want. I do see people waiting in there and sitting in the pews and grabbing a Bible and reading the Bible, or they can go to the fellowship hall, play on their phone, or back to their cars. So that's a big unique thing, is once you get a number, wait anywhere on that. And then we have 4 stations. After your number called, you get grab a cart, then you can go to Bakery and Bites, which is our dry goods. And then you can go to Frozen Feast, which is our frozen goods, frozen meats, and you exit, and then you can choose to go to the Urban Gleaners tables, which is outside, or Farm Fresh. And so we have a 20-foot refrigerated container, which is a blessing to have. So we can store a lot of refrigerated goods for 250 households or more. And so I'll show you some pictures of what that all looks like. So in the when you enter, we have teenage volunteers, and they're very enthusiastic and warm and welcoming. And so we have like 4 different high schools that represented it. We connect with key clubs at the high schools and National Honor Society, and with the college and career training to recruit some of these volunteers. And the entryway, we like really emphasize all the volunteers smiling. But on the far right, you'll see this 070. We have these we have 3 of these scattered throughout campus. So when your number is called, you can see what number you're on. We also have a community celebration time. At 10:15, people can come into the sanctuary and they can share anything good that's happening in their lives. So a birthday, anniversary, a new job, maybe they got good news from the doctor that they're cancer-free. And we sort of pass the microphone around and we give them a cake for anything that's celebrated. So that's one unique way to kind of build community. It's almost like sharing joys and concerns, but only sharing joys and without the prayer. We give them a cake instead. But we can certainly pray in our hearts for them. But that's been a really popular, unique way to celebrate joys. Again, this is a picture of our fellowship hall where people can play checkers and have bagels. You get a cart. We have 30 of these folding carts where people can shop with their own. They go and get bread. They go, and this is how we display it, kind of this nice, neat, organized way. For the dry goods, this is what a frozen meat looks like. This is what Urban Gleaners looks like. We have about 8 of these tables with pre-made foods. And then this is our refrigerated containers in the back right. We have a big, nice produce cart where we divide up our vegetables and make it presentable and look nice. We've also have recipients that volunteer. So like for our Easter egg hunt, we've had several Easter egg hunts where we advertised to the community, nobody came. But then I asked our food pantry recipients, hey, can you help fill our eggs and help hide the eggs? And then we had tons of people come when the food pantry helped volunteer and felt like they were part of the event in the planning. This is people playing in their playground. And what's really neat, I see families making friends as they're waiting and exchange phone numbers, and to see children playing with each other and so forth. And then one idea that we're doing this summer is on Wednesday nights, we just had open up our playground and badminton and stuff like that. And we had families invited just to play with each other. So that's one way that we kind of create community. And then we're doing this 5K fundraiser walk, where we're going to be walking through the nearby park. And the concept is everybody to wear the same color t-shirt, and we'll get money from corporate sponsors to put their logo on the back of the t-shirt. And so that is basically what we do. And our motto is connecting neighbors with food and love. And so kind of combining that food and love, that community together. So want to open it up for any questions or comments or thoughts about how we can support one another. All right. And if you want to unmute yourself, I'm kind of looking at comments, but please speak up.
I might jump in here real quick. We had a latecomer to the meeting, Sherry Seaman. Do I still see you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, there she is. Her church as well is highlighted in the upcoming omnibus, and they do a pretty amazing food program as well. Sherry, you want to give us a little background on that?
Sure, we've been doing it since about 2012. We started out just doing a free breakfast for anyone who wanted to come on Saturday. Started out with just literally a handful of people coming, and we are now up to 125 or 130 on a regular basis, like an every week basis. We don't skip Christmas, holiday, stuff like that. And when COVID started, we started doing a food box side also. And that, well, between the two sides, we do about 60 families every week. And so it has grown tremendously, and we split it, like I said, two sides. They can just get breakfast if that's all they want. We only have a couple that do that. But almost everybody gets a food box of some sort. So we do we always make sure there's at least one full meal, whether it's it's usually like a dinner meal. And then we have one other kind of breakfast or lunch thing. And then we have a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables for the boxes. And breakfast is huge. The box side, they do get choices about what they want. I set up a meal like last week what was last week? I actually don't remember. Oh dear. One of the last few meals was a hamburger with everything to make chili. And then the breakfast that week was oatmeal. I've got Joyce Adams with us today, who is actually the current elder for the program. Her and I have traded off, and she runs the breakfast side. So if I ask a box question, she looks at me with a blank face. And when she asks a breakfast question, I have no idea what breakfast is anymore. They're two separate programs because we've grown so large.
Yeah.
And our community is actually, Walport only has about 2,000 people max in it. And we serve all of what's called South County. So it's south of Newport, all the way down past the county line. So it's a huge area that we serve.
Great,
Cool.
great.
And actually, Sherry, I almost visited your food pantry when I was on a beach vacation. So I'll have to do it next time.
You got to come in and see us. Wonderful. Yes. And one of the interesting things to note here is that about 90% of the volunteers are not church or Presbyterian church.
Yes.
So we have a huge group of people that volunteer, and they just come out of the woodwork for us.
Great. Well, that kind of leads, I'm going to go through some of the questions in chat and then we can ask some more. But one was about volunteers, if they come from the church. I would say about 1/3 of our volunteers are church members, and the rest are all sorts of people from the community. And then another question was, you know, how often we serve, once a week on Saturday mornings, and where do we store everything? So I would say that we have 2 old Sunday school rooms that we don't use, that we store food inside, that we converted it to a food pantry storage area. We have 3 large commercial sized freezers, and then we have a 20-foot refrigerated container that we were able to get a grant to purchase. And then, do our recipients have cooking facilities? I would say that only about 5% are unhoused, but even those that are unhoused find a way to cook their food, and so or that they even just eat canned soup, room temperature as well. But we do accommodate those who are unhoused and might want more of a certain type of item and less of another. So Jody, I see you have a hand up.
Yes, and listening to them, those of you who have kitchens that serve meals, are they all commercial kitchens approved by the health department, or have you worked that?
So that's a good question. So we only serve like bagels and coffee. So we're not preparing or cooking the food. And so we don't need a special commercial kitchen for that.
Okay.
It is something that we might be exploring in the future to have more of a breakfast. But yeah, does somebody else actually cook a breakfast that they have a commercial?
We do. Brad, Wallport does, and our kitchen is commercial. It is set up completely as that, and anyone who uses it works under that guideline. So part of it is that if you are only serving to your congregation, you do not need a commercial kitchen. But once you go out into the community, then legally in the state of Oregon, it has to be through.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes. And if any of y'all want to share your email or contacts in the chats, and so that you can follow up and learn more about that, that would be good. All right, Carolyn, thank you for joining us as well. Anybody else have any questions or anything that you're doing that is unique that might be helpful for others? Oh, I see Becky and David with their hands up.
We do have a certified kitchen. We serve meals on Tuesdays and Thursdays, around 20 people in-house. Marion Pope Food Share provides the food. And then we also serve 20 to 25 out the door, including frozen meals for people on the weekends.
Thank you.
Brad, I'm wondering if people have any solutions for non-English speakers. More than 50% of our pantry recipients are non-English speaking. And we have probably 15 or 20 different languages that are presented, which is a real challenge.
Yes.
Anybody have ideas?
I'll share what we do is a lot of our teenage volunteers speak multiple languages. So that's very helpful. There's usually another person receiving food that can also translate. But one of the things that we do that helps is like all of our signs, like we have it written in English, Spanish, and Russian. But we also have all of our signs with illustrations and so the illustrations really help, and then you can just point to that. I also use like Google Translate on my phone, where I might say something on my phone and it translates. And then we also use like Microsoft Word Translate, where we can type in stuff and then it can translate your Word document into another language. Donna, did you have some? Yeah, or David?
I was just going to say, I've been in a lot of different places where I don't speak the language. It's not hard to learn 20 words of a language. And if you know the 20 words that are helpful, you can learn a few words. It's amazing what you can do with 20 words. So you might have someone with some modest capacity for language who just wants to learn a few words. It's a beginning. You can communicate a lot with a few words. So that's one thing. The other is the recruitment thing. You know, when people get involved, their investment is there. If it's possible to recruit one person from the community that can be a translator to be a volunteer, that might be another thing you can do. And then the other thing, back to the kitchens, food handler licenses. If you're going to do a meal, not only commercial kitchens, but food handler licenses are something to look into.
Yes. Yeah, for the Oregon Food Bank, we have to always have somebody with the food handler license on site. Okay, somebody asked a question about how does a church turn their kitchen into a commercial kitchen? So does those who have a commercial kitchen, do you know the process that you can share?
I think you need to check with the local county to see what their requirements are, and they can come out and tell you what you need to do.
Okay, so the county, great.
That's this market at Reedville. That's what we ran into, and they required like an oil separator outside the building and some changes to our plumbing. And, you know, of course, they check your refrigerators and freezers, that type of thing. And so it costs us a little bit of money, but, you know, once that's done, it's there forever.
Great, great. I do want to be mindful of the time. I want to point out that it's 1:02. I'm happy to stay for 30 minutes if needed and continue the conversation. But if anybody needs to drop out, thank you for coming. And feel free to message or email me or share your info. I did see that Donna had a question. If y'all want to continue, I'm happy to continue. Donna, can you unmute yourself, please?
Okay, I'm unmuted now. Can you see me? Did I go away?
Yes, we can see.
Okay. I know that a lot of the high schools, the kids get service hours for volunteering different places. And I think that would be a wonderful opportunity for the Spanish classes or other classes, other kids who can speak foreign languages to get their volunteer hours helping out there.
Absolutely. And so, yes, a lot of our high schoolers are getting service hours. And then, you know, we're already seeing them, we've done this for 4 years, you know, get college scholarships because of their volunteer hours. One thing that we also done that you might want to experiment with is, so we have kids from like 4 or 5 different high schools come, and they kind of become friends with one another. And we have really no youth group at our church. And we've invited them like once a month after they volunteer on the Saturday, like we go to like a food truck, the Fairview Food Plaza, and we pay for have lunch together. And so during that lunch, I do, like, as pastors say, is there anything I can pray for you? And so even though I'm not the youth pastor and we don't have a youth pastor, and they don't really go to church, it's just a really kind of a non-threatening way just to say, hey, I'm a Christian and I thank you for volunteering and want to support you in whatever's going on. And so that's just an interesting way that you could consider blessing your high school volunteers with. Other things that you might be doing unique that could bless us and knowing what you do. Don't be bashful, like I'm sure you.
Well, ours is a little bit different since ours is a food pantry that people come by and pick up things. But it's wonderful having interaction with the people who come up to you. And so many of them just want a friend and want to talk while they get things out of the pantry. But one of my favorite things, one day I was putting things in the pantry and 2 ladies came up and were standing down the stairs and looked up at me, and in unison they said, "We love you." And that made my week. Yeah. So
Yeah, absolutely.
we get so many rewards from doing things to help people.
Yeah.
Donna does a fabulous job with it. She really does. I've talked with some of them as well, and talked with them and prayed with them, some of them. But it's a powerful opportunity. It's called Little Free Pantries, but it's not so little. It's actually, I call it massive. You know?
We can get a lot of food in there.
I just have some thoughts on timelines. The first year or two, in my experience, is very exciting, and there's a lot of things to deal with and changes and things that some people like and they don't, and all of that. But within that first couple of years, then as things go, there's this sense of we're doing something. We're actually doing something real that matters, that makes a difference. And I think that's incredibly reinvigorating to a congregation, that to suddenly have this sense of purpose and mission and direction. I think it can be remarkably inspiring for the congregation that takes it on. That's as a completely side thing from all the other. I mean, they're all connected, right? But then there's this other version of, we've been doing this for 15 years and we've got to find some volunteers, and we don't know if we can keep it going. And I think at that point, there's the sense of who's supporting it, maybe different people, new volunteers. What about the community, the constituents that are a part of it? So there's this whole thing about the life of a thing, of a ministry, and of the congregation that I've kind of witnessed over the years, and I'm sure some of you have too, and it just occurred to me.
Yeah. Another thing I do hope is like that, we can remember the people here in this conversation. If you ever need any support, if you go through any struggles, that you can reach out and help let each other know that you're not alone. Definitely in food ministry, there's a lot of highs and feeling good about what you're doing, but there can also be a lot of challenges. Like often we might have, for the most part, everybody who receives food is so gracious and filled with gratitude and love, but there's always one or two people that come that might have a very difficult personality, or a volunteer that has a difficult personality. And so, or you might be facing, financial stresses about being able to buy food, or maybe there's a conflict in your church about how much storage and space the food pantry is taking up. So does anybody have anything that they're going through that they're just, that's stressing them out about their food pantry, that they need some support or encouragement about? Jody, I don't know if you're just talking to your friend, but you are muted. We have had to, I'll see if, yeah, you'll have to press on your phone or computer, unmute yourself. But while you do that, we've had some situations where the safety of our food pantry.
We were just scratching our heads.
Okay, thanks. Where we've had some people that were not safe at our food pantry, that we've actually had to have police involved and tell them that they're not allowed to come back to our food pantry. And it breaks my heart to do that, but sometimes we have to make those difficult decisions. Don't know if other people have had experiences like that. David has.
Well, at an overnight shelter I volunteered, no weapons are allowed in the building overnight. And a man came and he had an axe in his backpack, a hatchet. And so we had to ask him, can you leave that outside? And he said, why? So well, we don't allow weapons. He said, it's not a weapon, it's my hatchet. I said, well, unfortunately, given our guidelines, it crosses a line. How would you feel about leaving it outside? He's like, oh, I can leave it outside. I just didn't think of it.
Yeah.
So it's a different world that he lives in, where the hatchet is just something he carries.
Well, he needs it if he's unhoused to like build firewood and stuff like that. But yeah, we have a policy that backpacks have to stay outside, large backpacks too. Let's see. Did anybody have a chance to read the paper or glance through the dissertation that I wrote, or need a copy?
Yes. Mhm. I read it. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks. And feel free to share and stuff, because I wrote it for the church at large, and hope it is a blessing. So, all right. Well, if you do want like to further conversation, feel free to put your contact information in the chat. Does anybody feel like they want like maybe a quarterly check-in regarding Presbyterian churches that have food ministry? Where maybe every 3 or 4 months we touch base and support each other. Is that of interest to anybody? A couple people and stuff. So,
I can certainly put together a group email
yeah,
with all of the people then who signed up for this event, for the conversation, and share it. And if you keep track of it, then you will know how to reach everyone, and
okay.
just use it to send out joys or sorrows.
Good
Sounds
idea.
great. Yeah, because that's one thing that there's a lot of good people in the food ministry and a lot of good churches out there, and we can really learn from each other and be reminded that we're not alone. So, well,